Hi. Okay, so we have people here from Venezuela, Haiti, and from USA, and I see that we have a lot of questions regarding Haiti. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
Okay, great. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Um, so on the admin side, we're officially live on Facebook on our business page, Elizee Law Firm. So if anyone is not already following us on social media, please make sure to find us. Our page is called the name of the firm, Elizee Law Firm, on Facebook, Instagram, as well as Twitter and TikTok. I'm really excited for today's topic. I know that we have people from all over. We have some folks that registered from South America, and we have a few folks that are currently in Haiti as well in the US. And I'm accompanied by two of our team members. We have Leticia, who's with us, who's fluent in French and Creole, and we have Catalina, who's fluent in Spanish. So we are ready to take on your questions and answer them in your language of choice.
Hi, everyone.
And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction, attorney. So, I see we have a couple of people who are already settled in. Let's just wait a couple of minutes to start. Let's allow people to settle into their seats so we can get this very, very hot topic started as soon as possible. Thank you so much for being here, everyone.
So we're scheduled to start at 6:30. It's 6:27. So you guys are welcome to say hello, introduce yourselves. We are going to be covering a lot of information today. And hopefully, as we go on through the presentation, you'll see that we're answering some of your questions. I know a lot of people are frustrated with this program, don't really understand how it works. There's a lot of misinformation online, as well as, family members and people in the community. So hopefully the information that we're going to be sharing today is kind of going to clarify some of that information, to make sure that everyone is calm and is well aware of what's going on. So what's some of the main questions you guys have been hearing from people calling the firm, or just people out and about the Biden program, the parole program? What are some of the main concerns that we're hearing right now?
Okay, so we actually have one of our guests today writing down that there's an application that's not yet been approved. And I think this is an actually really interesting topic because this could be, I think, the majority of today's attendees' major concern. Attorney, I think you'll agree with us in that not being approved yet has been a major source of worry among a lot of people nowadays. March
Yes, so that's
2023.
definitely something. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely something that we're going to cover is the number of applications that were filed, when they were filed, the backlog that immigration is currently experiencing, and why some of the guidance that USCIS has shared with us as to how to handle some of those cases and what to expect. I see that we
That
have
sounds
Paola up here
awesome.
with us. Hi, Paola. Thanks for joining in.
Thanks, everyone. So, without further ado, it is 6:30 in the evening, and we are just about getting ready to get this webinar going for everyone. While I give you a short introduction to our firm, why doesn't everybody just go ahead and write in our chat where you're writing or where you're watching us from, so we can get loose and get started. Everyone, my name is Catalina. I work with the acquisitions department here at Elizee Law Firm. Elizee Law Firm is located in Miami, Florida, and we are dedicated to immigration. We are taking cases from all over the world, so do not limit yourself or your questions if you are anywhere outside of Miami. We speak French, Creole, Spanish, and English for anybody who would like to inquire about any of our services. Our phone number is 305-371-8846. I'm going to go ahead and leave that information in the chat so that everybody can have it handy and can contact us whenever they have an immigration concern. I have here Leticia, who is also joining me from the acquisition team, and the one and only attorney Patricia Elizee, who is going to be guiding us through today's topic at hand.
Great.
So let's get started.
Okay, everyone, let's dive right into it. Humanitarian parole 1 year later. I don't know about you, but I definitely remember 1 year ago getting the announcement that USCIS had created this new program where Haitians would benefit. It was big news in our community. It's something that we needed and we were hoping would help a lot of people. It has helped a lot of people, but we're hoping that it was going to be a lot more effective than it ended up being. Why? So as you know, the Humanitarian Parole Program was created to help a number of countries, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, and Haiti. A lot of these countries have nationals who are coming to the border because they are trying to flee really horrible situations at home. In Haiti particularly, the US Embassy has been closed, right? Haitians have not had the ability to renew their tourist visas easily, to be able to get their green card applications processed. Because of that, the humanitarian parole was really a bridge, to help them come to the US lawfully so that they could have access to that lawful status, so that they could be reunited with family members. Because so many applicants have filed for parole, it has really become a chaos. People have been very desperate. We've heard rumors of people paying agents or paying people in the community to push their cases along, where all of that is obviously not going to make a difference on their case. So we decided, you know what, let's go back and touch on what this program was for, what's happened with this program, how the applications have been adjudicated so far. Okay, next slide, please.
Sounds good.
So with parole, what is this parole status that they created? The humanitarian parole is a temporary status where the executive branch, right? So the president is able to use, ICE is able to use to allow people to come into the country on a lawful temporary status. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So the idea of the parole programs was so that the immigration officers were able to allow people to come in on a case-by-case analysis. What the Biden administration has done is take this parole program and has used it for bigger groups of people. So instead of using it on a case-by-case basis at the border or on a case through USCIS, the Biden administration has made it available to big groups of people. So either for Afghanistans that were fleeing the Taliban, or Ukrainians that are fleeing the war, for example. And then it was extended to Venezuelans because of the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. And eventually it was opened up and it was expanded to include Venezuelans, Cubans, Haitians, and Nicaraguans. But the original purpose of this parole status was not to allow big groups of people to come. It was really to allow immigration officers on urgent humanitarian reasons to take a look at each individual case and see if there's through their discretionary power, if they should allow an immigrant to come in where they didn't have status. Next slide, please.
Oops.
Okay, great. So I'm guessing that a lot of people that are taking part of this webinar already know the basics of the program, okay? But just really quickly, to take advantage of the USCIS Humanitarian Parole Program, you have to be a national of Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela. You have a US sponsor who has been vetted and who has been approved so that you can come in and they've signed that they'll be responsible for the immigrant. Next slide, please. Okay, great. And this is where these are the general steps of that program. The first step is to file the actual Biden application, and excuse me if I say Biden application because it's really come to be known as the Biden program. But the application that you're filing is going to be the I-134A, which is the application for the parole, and that's filed electronically online on the USCIS website. That's going to be the US supporter taking the first step. Unfortunately, that's where a lot of people get stuck. Until the first step is approved, so until the US supporter has been approved, the immigrant abroad is not able to continue and submit their information, their biographic information on USCIS, and then create an app on their profile on CBP1 so that they can get the advanced travel authorization to fly to the US and be admitted for 2 years on this parole status. Something that's really interesting that I want to point out is the status is for 2 years. The Biden administration has made it very clear that there's no guarantee as to a pathway to a green card or a pathway to citizenship. However, when you look at the specificities of the program, you'll notice that they mention you will have the ability to re-parole. They haven't given us the instructions yet on exactly how they're going to be doing that for people who are paroled in through that are Haitian, Cuban, Nicaraguans, or Venezuelans. But the idea is after the 2 years, they should be allowed to re-parole. For some of the countries, for example, Venezuela, last year, they created a new TPS program for Venezuela. And the administration was actually encouraging folks who entered the country on parole to change their status to TPS. So that's also something to consider. I know there's a lot of buzz in the community, whether there's going to be a new TPS for Haitians or not. So in the event that this year there is a new TPS for Haitians, those who entered on parole will be able to take advantage of the TPS program. Next.
Attorney, before we move on, I think it's important for us to talk about, the deciding factor of whether a person will be allowed to come in on parole or not. Let's say if we're able to establish financial support in the first step of the application, does that mean that I'm going to be granted advanced travel authorization to come in?
So unfortunately, no. So firstly, the advanced travel authorization is not a guarantee. That's going to be after immigration does a background check on you. So for example, we've seen cases where the immigrant had, for example, a deportation case in the past. Because of that history, sometimes USCIS does not give them the travel authorization. We've also seen cases where the immigrant has had problems with the US embassy or consulate abroad. So let's say you had filed for a tourist visa, but there was a finding of fraud, or you went to an appointment and there was an issue with your file. We've seen that those cases where there's some type of issue in their file at the US embassy will also keep them from getting that travel authorization. And don't forget, the final determination is made when the person is physically in the US at the airport. So for this program, you're not able to drive to the border and be allowed in. You have to fly in. to an international airport. At the airport, the CBP officer is going to be the person that makes the final decision as to whether you're let in or not. Um, Even though this is a 2-year program and a lot of people are coming with the hopes of fighting a pathway to stay here longer, you're not able to have the intent when you first come in that you would like to stay here forever. So we've definitely heard of examples where people are coming in, the officers are asking them, how long do you intend to stay in the US? And depending on how the person answers. So if the person says, well, I want to stay here and never go back to my home country. I never want to go back to Venezuela. I never want to go back to Nicaragua. But their permit, their ability to stay is only for 2 years. The immigration officer at the airport is able to say, well, I'm sorry, but you no longer qualify because of how you answered the question at the airport.
So that's a really good point then. We need to show that the intent is to stay for a maximum of 2 years when coming in through the parole program.
Yes, that's correct. And also part of the application itself asks you, how long is the person intending to stay? And you definitely don't want to put a period for longer than 2 years in the application.
Thank you, attorney.
So now we wait and we're waiting and we're waiting, right? How do we handle all of that? What exactly are we seeing? The first thing is in May of 2023, because so many applications were submitted, because so many people were waiting at the time for a long period to get their application touched, immigration had to make a formal announcement that they were no longer taking all of the cases on a first come, first served basis. That as of May of 2023, half the cases were going to be processed first come, first serve. The other half was going to be processed as a lottery randomly. And I'm sure we've seen a lot of these examples with our family and friends. You may have someone who applied in June that was approved before someone who's waiting and has an application that's been pending since January or February. In fact, we still have people who are waiting for their application and they were filed in January or February. That's just the reality of a lot of people's cases. So what USCIS is saying is one of the reasons that there's so much backlog. Number one, there were no real plan when it comes to staff within USCIS. It's not like they created a whole new department. They hired a bunch of people just to process these cases, right? And they received a lot more applications than they could physically process. So these immigration officers are definitely overwhelmed and they're not able to keep up with the volume of cases that they're having. They're also noticing that people are filing twice for the same person. So maybe someone filed in January for their uncle, and by June they were tired of waiting, so they filed again for the same person. So immigration has made it clear if you do that, they will reject that second application because they're not allowing one person to file for the same beneficiary several times because it creates a backlog and confusion within the system itself. So if everyone is looking at the screen, this is a really great representation of who's been allowed to come in. So unfortunately, we've been really limited with the numbers that we have access to. We have numbers up until August of 2023, right? So if you see Venezuela's parole program started in 2022, then it was expanded to the other countries in January of 2023. Now, green is the numbers for Venezuela. Blue are the numbers for Haiti. If you're taking a look at this chart, just by looking at it, right, it's really obvious that Haitians are the ones that are submitting the largest number of actual cases, of actual applications. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide so that we can really dive into the total numbers in an easier way. So through the end of August of 2023, out of the 4 countries, there's been 211,000 people. So this is Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans that have arrived already and have been legally been able to be paroled into the US. So when you break these numbers down, we have about 45,000 Cubans, we have 71,000 Haitians, 32,000 Nicaraguans, and 61,000 Venezuelans. So the number one nationality of immigrants who are entering on parole, believe it or not, is Haitians, right? Then followed by Venezuelans, Cubans, and Nicaraguans. Nicaragua, their applications are being processed a lot faster because less people are applying. Unfortunately for Haitians and for Cubans, they have more applications that are being filed. They have longer to wait when you look at when you're comparing the numbers. And this is a really great way of really looking how the numbers compare between the 4 countries, right? So something that's been noticed, there was a study that was made, and they noticed that USCIS approves about the same number of applications per country. So if you are approving the same number of applications for Haitians that you are for Nicaraguans, but you have a lot more Haitians applying versus Nicaraguans, then when you take a look at it, it's not really on a first come, first serve basis, and it's not really equal processing. The reason being is, for example, for Nicaragua, there's a 14.6% chance that your application is going to be approved a lot faster than the norm. While for Haitians, there's almost an 18% chance that you're going to be running behind. So, for example, the approval speed for Haiti is 68% slower than, for example, you're looking at Venezuela, their processing time is 186% faster. Bottom line is, when you're looking at the number of applications being approved and processed per country versus the number of applications that they are receiving, the numbers don't add up. It doesn't turn out to be a fair processing when it's taking a lot longer for one country's application to be processed versus another. Now, there's a lot of politics that go into that, that obviously we don't have preview to. There's a lot of rumors, a lot of discussions. For example, there's also a lot of fraud, right? So something that we've seen and we've heard of is, for example, other nationals going to Haiti and buying a Haitian passport to show that they're Haitian so that they could benefit through the program. That's a big problem. Or people switching identities to be able to come in through the program, or people with criminal histories that are trying to sneak in through the program. So all of those issues are also slowing down the process. What's really interesting here is this is a breakdown of the number of applications that were received by USCIS and how they were processed. You will see that January and February are the months where USCIS received the largest number of applications. So for example, January of last year, they received 325,500 applications. That's when they first opened the program. When they had 30, so remember, with this parole program, you can only let in 30,000 people at a time. And as soon as the portal opened, you had 325,000 applications plus. The next month, it was 364,000 applications plus. And each month after that, it went down a little bit to where in August, there was about 60,000 applications. But overall, from what we're seeing in the studies, is that 40% of cases filed in January have already been processed, and 60% of all general approvals are from January and February. So USCIS has made it a priority to touch the cases that were filed in January and February. It's just when they first opened up the portal, there was a floodgate they were overwhelmed with cases. They were not able to keep up with the cases. So they're slowly trying to get to those files. I know that it's really frustrating. We have a good number of people, for example, that we've been able to help. So as an attorney, unfortunately, a lawyer is not able to make the case go faster, right? No one is able to make the case go faster. There's not a magic trick. There's not a way to contact an immigration officer on the side. We've had clients we've helped contact, for example, their local representative in Congress or Senate. And even those offices are coming back and telling us that there's nothing that they can do, that USCIS is complaining how hectic it is, and they're just trying to get to cases one at a time. What we have noticed, however, is that there's a lot of mistakes on these applications. There's a lot of errors on the applications themselves, as well as the documents that were uploaded. So as the application is pending, if there's an error in the file, so what's most important right now, if you have an application that's pending, the most important thing is to sit down and review the application to make sure that the person's name is spelled correctly, because we've seen that cause a lot of delays on cases. To make sure that the beneficiary's email is correct. We had one case which really touched me, where they were approved and they had been approved from quite some time, but because they had put the wrong email in the application, the beneficiary never got access to it. Finally, once we pointed that out to them, they were able to update it, they were able to get their approval, and they're physically in the country now. It's important to understand that one application is not going to cover the entire family. People still believe that one application will cover the entire family. That is not the case. You need an application for each individual. If you don't have that, then only one person is going to be approved and one person is going to be able to come in with the Biden program. The documents that you upload have to be clear, and they have to be the documents that immigration has requested. If you upload documents from a co-sponsor, that co-sponsor should be listed in the application, and the co-sponsor should write a letter to USCIS stating that they know and agree that they're going to be jointly responsible for the person coming in. So we've seen a lot of cases where they've used the information. So the main petitioner, the US citizen or lawful permanent resident, has put together with their spouse, has put together with their parent to sponsor someone coming in, and they send the other person's information, but the person's name doesn't appear as a co-sponsor in the application, and there's no letter that's signed by the person saying, this is my ID, this is who I am, and I agree to be jointly liable. If that letter is not there, immigration is not going to consider it. So my advice is to make sure you take the time, you review your application to make sure that everything is clear, so that when an officer gets to your application, they can approve it quickly. Because if they cannot see that you qualify with the hundreds and hundreds of cases that they're seeing a day, they're just going to go ahead and skip your application or just deny it. And then you're going to have to start from scratch. Okay.
Attorney, I have a question here in the chat that says, is it okay to have two people apply for the same person? And what if one of the applications was not done well? Is it best to cancel and reapply, or how would you proceed?
So per USCIS guideline, you're not able to have two applications for the first person. They didn't say that you cannot have two different, so you can have two different people apply for you. So we've definitely seen that. And we've had people come in on one versus the other. If there's something wrong with one of the applications, you don't necessarily have to cancel it or withdraw it. What you should be doing is reviewing it to see what the error is, and then submitting an amendment request to USCIS. So because there's been so many errors, USCIS has issued guidance on if this, then that, if this, then that, which means if the application is still pending on USCIS, this is how you amend it. If the application has been approved by CIS, however, the person hasn't had their travel document being issued to them, this is how you fix it. There's different scenarios. So the best thing to do is to go back to the USCIS.gov website, see if you can understand the directions that USCIS is giving you. Obviously, this is something that we've helped a lot of people do, is take a look at their applications and guide them through their amendments so that they are able to submit the correct information to USCIS. So yes, you can have two different petitioners apply for you, two different supporters for one person.
Okay, thank you, attorney, for clarifying that. I have another question here. It says, do you think the program will end or continue?
So that's a really great question. And to be honest, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why, because it's a very political question. So the Biden administration announced this program that would be valid for 2 years, 2 years before his term came to an end. That's number one. Number two, we don't know what's going to happen with the next administration. This election this year is extremely important, not only for citizenship applications, green cards, but especially for humanitarian programs that are temporary, including the Biden program, as well as including TPS. You know, Trump has made it very clear that he wants to get rid of all of these temporary programs. That's not his intent. And also, there are federal lawsuits pending in Texas, where they are already there's about 20 states that have brought suit saying that the program is invalid, that is beyond the powers of the president to use the parole power for this kind of program. That's not what it was intended for. And actually, there's been buzz that we should be hearing a final decision pretty soon on that case. So I hope that this program is able to continue. I hope that they're able to make it more effective. I understand that this is a humanitarian program, and I really do support the meaning behind it, right? Like the goal that they had by coming up with this program. I just hope that it was more effective. I don't know if, for example, if there was a small filing fee, that they would have the funds to have enough immigration officers to adjudicate the cases quickly. That's something that I've heard a lot of families complain about, that, they understand that it's free, but if they had to pay $100, $200, $300 to get their applications processed faster so that immigration had enough officers, they would have gladly done that. But unfortunately, this is very political, so we just have to continue doing the groundwork when it comes to calling your representatives and being, making sure that you know what's going on, you keep up with the news and all of that. But before we kind of get further into the future of the programs, I really want to touch base on CBP 1, because there's been a lot of usage of the CBP 1 program. So for those of you who are not aware, in October of 2020, the Biden administration has made it that when you come into the border, you have to first create a portal on the CBP 1 app, which is the same app that you would use to get your travel authorization through the Biden program. You make an appointment at the border for you to be vetted, for you to be able to come into the US. There are a lot of families who are turning to the CBP 1 program because they have lost their patience with the humanitarian parole program. CBP 1 going in through the border is extremely different than the Biden program. And the way that is different is when you come in through CBP 1, yes, there is a high probability that you'll be able to come in with parole and you'll be able to stay in the country for 1 year or 2 years, depending on the discretion of the immigration officer that lets you in. However, there's also the very, very high probability that you will be sent to removal proceedings. What does that mean? They let you in, they give you an I-94. However, they also start a case against you in immigration court for deportation. So you have to be aware of that. I know a lot of families are desperate. I know that it's not easy, but you need to understand the program before you try to take advantage of it. Next slide, please. So these are the numbers of these are numbers between 2017 and 2024 of folks who have actually come in through the border. And if you see, when it comes to the US Border Patrol total encounters, in 2023, we had a little bit more than 2 million people that CBP encountered at the border. If you're looking at the numbers for 2020, which is when the program was initiated, it was 405,000. So between when CBP1 started and now, there's been a huge increase in the number of people that are coming in. Next slide, please. So this is a great way to take a look at it. The Biden administration has allowed 422,000 people to come in through the CBP1 app since 2020, and 340,000 through the Parole program. So yes, they've allowed more people in through the CBP1 app, but however, remember, CBP1 dates back to 2020. The Parole program dates back only 1 year. So far, even though they've let more people in through CBP1, when you're comparing the percentages, they've let more people in a shorter amount of time with the Parole program. Okay, next slide. So what's going on when it comes to challenges to the program, right? So like we said before, the program right now is being opposed by about 20 Republican states, and there's a pending lawsuit against the Biden administration. There's not a ruling yet on that case. And we may be getting a ruling on that case probably definitely before summer of this year. And the 2024 elections are coming up. The federal elections at the end of this year. So the Republicans are criticizing Democrats for using this parole program to bypass the border. They're saying, listen, this parole program, or this parole power that the president has, was not to allow hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people to come in. However, it was supposed to be used on a case-by-case basis. I'm sure you guys have seen the news where every single candidate is speaking about immigration. So right now we're down to 2 candidates on the Republican side, and both of them are pretty stern when it comes to immigration. I'll be very clear again, if Republicans take over the White House, immigration is going to completely change again next year. All of these programs that we're benefiting from, they will be attacked. They will be targeted by the Republican administration, especially if it's Donald Trump who wins the presidency. Okay. Currently, there's a lot of discussions in Congress about passing a package for aid to Ukraine and Israel. However, the Republicans have tied the border policy changes into that. So basically, the Republicans are currently right now, today, saying, if we don't take a look at the border, we're not going to give any money to Ukraine or Israel. And when you take a look at the articles and you look at the statements, what that really means is the Republicans are trying to reduce the number of people who are coming in on parole every month. They're trying to reduce the number of people coming in on CBP1 every month. They're trying to make changes to the asylum laws. So until they're able to make those changes with the Democrats, they will not allow funding to go through. So that's something that's currently being negotiated now. And according to the reports, Democrats and Republicans are coming to some type of agreement when it comes to limiting parole and limiting people coming in to CBP1 in order to be able to get the funding that they need for Ukraine and Israel. So that's something to kind of keep in mind as you're listening to the news and seeing how everything is kind of intertwined. So, we just have to pay attention and understand what the program is for, how the program was supposed to be working, how it's working now, and why we have such a huge delay. Would I recommend someone filing 100 applications right now by different people? No, right? Because you don't want to, you definitely have to balance just making sure that your application is correctly filed with the proper documentation and waiting for immigration to get to your file. At our firm, what we do with our files that are pending, we do give the US petitioner the ability to call USCIS with us on the line and try to get some information of the pending case. Sometimes we're able to get that information from the immigration officer, sometimes we're not. And we try to keep track of the file. Until immigration approves it, however, there's not a lot that can be done to push them to approve it. So again, if you guys take anything away from today's webinar is if you have a pending application and you're just not sure what's going on with it or if there's anything wrong, is to sit down, have an attorney review it yourself, make sure that the passport number is correct, the name is spelled correctly, the person's email is correct, all of the information is filled out correctly. So we've seen mistakes where the US agent, the US address is put in instead of the person abroad. So obviously if the person is in Nicaragua, the address needs to go for the beneficiary and not for the petitioner. We've seen cases where there's no assets listed at all for the supporter. Obviously that's a mistake because that's something that immigration will look at. What is the cash assets that you have so that they are able to process the case and take that in consideration. So just go back, review your cases, make sure everything's okay. If you need to amend it, make the amendment, and take it from there. Next slide.
Attorney, before we move on, I did want to, can you please clarify if the program ends for whatever reason, whether the Democrats end it, the Republicans end it, if the program does end, what's going to happen to all the pending applications that are still waiting to either be approved or denied?
So unfortunately, we're going to have to wait to see what the final determination is. So they may grandfather them in, which means they may allow the pending applications to go ahead and be processed. But that's not something that's guaranteed. We definitely have to wait.
Okay. And we have something, one of our viewers is actually mentioning one of the many rumors that you hear around the parole program. And he's saying, quote, I heard through the grapevine that the program is definitely going on for 5 years. Would you please just go ahead and assert your answer for this rumor?
Sure. So again, unfortunately, this program is dependent on who's in office, and also if there's funding for the program. There's two things. There's funding and there's who's going to be in charge of it. If a Republican takes office and we have a new president that's not supportive of this program, there's obviously no guarantee that this program will continue. So one easy way of understanding these kind of programs is really understanding what prosecutorial discretion is, okay? So don't forget that we have three different branches of government. We have the legislative that creates the law, and then we have the executive that actually enforces it. But the way that the executive enforces the law, they have a lot of discretion. So one easy way of understanding a situation, for example, if you're pulled over for speeding, the officer is one can ignore you. That's part of his discretion. He can pull you over and give you a ticket, or he can pull you over and let you go, or he can pull you over and take you to jail. Because that officer is making the decision how to enforce the law. Now take that into a bigger level, right? Whoever is the president has the ability to enforce immigration law the way they see fit with the laws in place. There's been no change in immigration law. It's just how they're enforcing it has changed. The priorities for enforcing it. All of that is based on the administration. So as the administration changes, then obviously the way that they enforce the law may also change. So, let's just keep in mind that the program unfortunately has become somewhat of a lottery program. If there's an approval or rejection, there's no appellate process for this case. You just have to file another application. And as of now, the program is still accepting new application. The program is still active and the program is still running. Okay. Next slide.
Thank you, attorney. Okay, this is the slide you were waiting for.
Okay, great. So I think that may have been the last slide on the presentation. So here I see that we have a question. My applications were recently approved. They have not traveled yet. Can I still apply for additional beneficiaries? Yes, absolutely you can. That's a great question that people haven't asked yet. Can they add additional beneficiaries to their through their portal? Yes, you may. If you have pending applications and you add someone else into your application to your portal, what's going to happen is that once they approve one, for the most part, they're going to approve all of them. But if they've all been approved and you'd like to petition for additional people, then you just go ahead, you're starting over, you're applying for new people now. So you're able to go ahead and do that. As long as you continue to qualify financially, then yes, you are able to add additional people. There's not a cap on the number of people you're able to apply for. What immigration says is you want to take a look at the poverty guidelines to make sure that you're able to provide the evidence that you make enough money, that you have enough assets, that you're able to support the number of people that you're petitioning on behalf so that they're able to come in. So if you don't make a lot of money, obviously, they're not going to allow you to bring in 5, 10 people, right? So you just want to take a look at the poverty guidelines and the documents that you're submitting to show that, listen, you are able to take care of additional people.
Attorney, so when you were discussing the possibility of doing amendments, one of our viewers is actually asking, um, how can I make sure that they get my amendments? How would I go on about that if I were to do it on my own or if the firm were to do it for me?
Sure. So when it comes to amendments, as you know, this program is completely online. It's through the USCIS portal. So the way to submit your amendment is by putting together a packet with a letter stating to USCIS what are the amendments that you're asking for. So, dear USCIS officer, this is the mistake that I see in my application. This is the mistake. This is the correction. This is the mistake. This is the correction. It has to be signed by hand. So they're not going to accept a letter that is electronically signed. They're not going to take a letter that is just typed out with no signature. So they want a handwritten signature. They want that letter uploaded to the portal along with any supporting documents that you want to submit along with it. So that's how you go about doing it, and to make sure that it was properly filed.
Attorney, I think you've made it 100% clear that this is something people can do on their own, but it's also something we can offer as a service here at the firm. Because we understand that not everybody is an attorney. Not everybody has the eye to catch what the error is in their application. So, if you do have those doubts and you do feel like you need an additional eye overlooking what you're doing, you can definitely contact the firm. We'll be able to assist you further and guide you through that part of the process. One more question that I have here. Can these people apply for political asylum? I'm guessing that in that context, that, can parolees apply for political asylum?
Yes. So once someone enters, for you to be able to apply for asylum, you have to show for the most part, that you submitted your application less than 1 year after your entry. So for example, if you entered on January 1st, you have until December 31st to file your application for asylum, regardless of how you entered. So therefore, if you entered on parole, you have 1 year to file for an asylum if you qualify for asylum. And I say if you qualify for asylum because asylum law is very complicated. Um, you know, you want to make sure that you have to have the documentation, you have to be able to work with someone who really focuses on asylums. So for example, at our firm, we no longer do asylums because it's so specific. Asylum law develops sometimes weekly. You really want to go to an attorney that does a lot of asylums or only does asylums to have an analysis of your case to see if you should be applying or not. To qualify for asylum, you have to show that you've received persecution for something about yourself that you're not able to change. For example, your political view, your religious beliefs, your sex, your sexual orientation, something of that matter. Typically, being persecuted because of a money situation, or because people think you have money, or because you were deported, or and they think you're an American citizen, something to that factor, for the most part, you're not going to qualify for asylum. Or because the country is unstable. I hear a lot of people asking, do I qualify for asylum because the area where I live is really bad? The answer generally is no, because for you to qualify for asylum, you can't show the country's bad. You have to show, this is what happened to me personally because of this reason, and this is the evidence of it.
And one of our last questions from the chat today is, if I am denied my parole application, will I know?
Yes, so so if it's going to be the beneficiary, the travel authorization will be denied. If it's the US citizen or the LPR, lawful permanent resident, who's applying for you, they will get a rejection notice. So whichever decision immigration takes, you will get a notice. You'll get it in your email, you'll get it in the portal, saying whether it's approved or denied, whether the travel document is approved or rejected. And something that we have not touched on, just because the travel document has been approved doesn't mean that it's going to stay like that. Just because CBP1 on one day says that the travel document is approved doesn't mean that a week from now they're not going to change it to say it's rejected. And we've also seen that case. Unfortunately, there's no way for us to double check why CBP has changed it from approved to denied. You could see there was something in the file, maybe they made a mistake, but there's no way for sure for us to verify it. You'd have to apply again. If anyone has an immigration history, if, for example, you've applied for something before and were denied, you were deported in the past, you've applied for something in the embassy and you were denied, and there was a red flag that was put on your file, we highly, highly recommend that you do a FOIA, which is called the Freedom of Information Act, where you ask immigration to send to you, and that's something that we do very often as well in the firm, where you're sent a copy of your file to see what is in your file. So keep that in mind. There's no guarantee that that travel document is actually going to be staying valid once you actually go try to use it. That's the situation that we're in right now with this program.
Thank you so much for clarifying that, attorney. Okay, so if we have no more questions in our chat at the moment, I would like to take a moment to say thank you to everyone who reached out to us to sign up for this webinar. It is the first one of 2024, but there's definitely more coming for the rest of the year. Oh, one more
So
question.
I see.
How to know how many persons can apply for how many people can a sponsor apply for? I think you already answered that, attorney, but if you want to go ahead and clarify that for everyone.
Sure. So you have to look up the poverty guidelines on the USCIS.gov website. The poverty guidelines is what USCIS has says you should follow to know if you make enough money income wise to sponsor someone. So the poverty guidelines is what they use for green card applications to know if the US citizen or the lawful permanent resident makes enough money for the financial affidavit. There's not a strict guideline. There's not a strict number that they're asking that you have to show that you make. Is just a suggested guideline that you use the poverty guidelines as a way to see, okay, whether you make enough money. Because don't forget, for you to be approved to sponsor, immigration is going to look at not only your income, but also your assets, your cash assets. So maybe, for example, your income is not as high as you'd like it to be, but you have a checking account, you have a savings account, you have a 401k, you have a life insurance policy with vested funds. All of that can also help you qualify to be a sponsor for parole versus only your income. And I saw that there were questions about are we able to help people come into the US any other way? Yes, we're an immigration firm. We really focus on immigration law, and we help people from all over the world come to the US in a lawful manner. So something that we do a lot of is green card applications, visas requests, temporary work visas for different fields. If you follow us on Instagram and our other social media platforms like TikTok, you'll see that we talk a lot about artists, we talk a lot about musicians, we talk a lot about people in sports. For example, someone who teaches dance may qualify for a visa to come and teach dance in the US that didn't think they would qualify for it. All of these countries, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Haiti, they are rich in culture, very rich in culture. So imagine someone in Haiti who specializes in folklore class or folklore dance, or who sings Tubadu. They would qualify for special visas for that, which is the P3 visa, that you wouldn't qualify for unless you were a professional that is in the cultural scene in your home country. So we also help a lot with that, and see if we've also helped a lot with people doing change of status applications, like someone coming in on a tourist visa, but then they want to change to student, to have another status to continue long term. Tourist applications overseas is something that people tend to do on their own, but we can answer their questions, guide them through it, make sure they understand what the immigration officer is asking for and why they're asking for it, so that they're prepared for the interview.
Ok, donc nam di tout moun merci, tout moun qui était là avec nous en soya. Moi espérer que tout ça mette Elizee dit te répondre avec d'autres questions que nous te gagné sur Biden nan, yo relé l'Haïti. Si nous besoin plus d'informations, nous ka toujours contacter nous, gen numéro de téléphone qui sur écran, email adresse et website. Nous ka toujours follow mettre Elizee sur Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Chaque semaine, il poste vidéo, côté n'a besoin de parler de plusieurs sujets immigration pour artistes, pour tout bagaille. Donc, pas hésiter et follow nous et en contact avec nous. Et puis à bientôt. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and we'll see you at our next webinar, which is going to be on February 13th at 6:30. We're going to be discussing marriage-based green cards and fiancé visas. So we're going to be giving the top 5 tips on how to get a fiancé visa approved, and we're going to be giving the top 5 tips on how to get a marriage based green card approved. Showing that you have a real marriage, showing the love that you have with your spouse or your significant other, is very different when you have to put it on paper versus having to speak with an immigration officer. And lately, they have not been giving a lot of in-person appointments. Everything is through how you document your relationship. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. February 13th. So le 13 février, mois prochain, n'a bien prochain webinaire là, côté que vraiment n'a entré dans plus de discussion sur dossier fiancé et dossier mariage qui genre que nous avons vraiment présenté dossier ça yo pour immigration approuvée. So see you guys on February 13th. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye bye. Thank you.